Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming for another Western Canadian Reason webinar. As you all know, our webinars are free to attend, but as we are a volunteer-run group, we rely on community support to keep our events going. So if you can donate, please, any amount will help us keep us going. You can scan the QR code or go to our website at rockymountaineatheist.ca. A quick disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed by speakers and audience during this event are their own and do not reflect the official policies, positions, or views of the Rocky Mountain Atheists. We are an inclusive community of atheists, humanist skeptics, and secular freethinkers. Everyone is welcome. It doesn't matter what's your religion or not. We have a few guidelines. Respect all participants and viewpoints. Keep comments and questions on topic. Discussion is encouraged. Civility is required. We've never had any disruptions. Let's keep it that way. We have a Q&A at the end. You can use the hand raising icon under reactions to ask a question. And please wait until we call you to unmute yourself before speaking and keep the questions concise and relevant to the topic. Tonight, we'll have our friend Rodney Schmaltz. He's professor in the Department of Psychology at MacEwan University, and he works with psychology of belief. And he'll be talking to us about things that go bump in your brain, the psychology of hauntings. So now I'll stop sharing so that Rodney can start.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. I will share my screen and we'll get started. All right. Can you see the slides okay, Helio?
Yes.
Excellent. So imagine this. You walk into an old home, you believe it's haunted, you go into the basement, you feel something in your chest, the hair on the back of your neck goes up, and you swear out of the corner of your eye you've seen something. It's reasonable to believe you've seen a ghost. And in fact, if you believe that, more than half of Canadians would agree with you. There's a recent survey at UBC. This came out last year. It was from a random sample of around 1,000 Canadians. And you can see that over 50% believe in ghostly hauntings. So what's going on here? Today, I'm going to give you some explanations as to why people might believe in ghosts. So we'll look at the psychology behind the belief, and we'll also look at some of the environmental factors that might impact why people feel like they've experienced a haunting. A little bit about my background. I teach a course designed to differentiate between science and pseudoscience. So it's a course on scientific skepticism. And one of the things students in my class do is go on a ghost hunt. Every year we pick a different location in Edmonton that is supposedly haunted, and we go for a hunt there. And the reason we do it is to debunk the tools of the ghost hunters. So last month, Kenny Biddle gave a fantastic talk on a lot of the tools of the ghost hunters. We use most of the tools that he talked about in that. And if you haven't seen that webinar, go back and check it out. It was great. And we show why they're not actually finding ghosts, and we give the rational explanation for what the tools are supposedly doing. And I'll talk about a few more of them today too. And we also go into the psychology of why people might have these experiences at these different locations. So I'll give you an example of a couple of the places that we have gone hunting. Our last one was in October. Last October, and we went to the Freemasons Hall, which was fantastic. It's a very old building. Has the first elevator in Edmonton, the first lending library, so a lot of history there. And we turned out the lights and started looking for ghosts. We did not find any. But if you'd like to hear more about it, we were lucky enough to have Kat McLeod and Adrian Hill from the Skeptic Zone join us. And in fact, they've joined us on the last few haunts. And it's on their podcast. So check out this podcast and you can get a full overview of what these ghost hunts are like and what we're doing. A couple more examples of what we've done. We went to the Stony Plain Multicultural Center, and I'll come back to this one in a bit. There's a few very interesting things here, but some paranormal investigators went there, and they said it's one of the most haunted places they've ever seen. So they were seeing things out of the corner of their eye and people in the shadows and so on. And one of the things that came up was that there was these unusual smells, and it almost smelled like perfume. So the students and I debunked that one quite quickly. They sell soap there, and it's fairly strong, and you could smell the soap on the second floor that they sold on the first floor. But the paranormal investigators were quite convinced this was the perfume from beyond. Another interesting one was the Edmonton Golf and Country Club. A few ghosts supposedly there. I'm going to get to this one more in a few minutes as well, but I'll give you one of the hauntings there, and I hope this isn't too terrifying for anyone. There is they call it the snack shack where they sell food at the golf course, and some of the employees reported there that they had an iPod, and sometimes it would skip for no reason. That's it. But clearly, it was a ghost that came back from the beyond to slightly irritate the good people in the snack shack. But that was one of the hauntings. And this here is the Mackenzie House. This is just north of White Avenue, for those of you that are familiar with Edmonton. The home's about 100 years old, and there are supposedly two ghosts here. There's supposed to be a man in a top hat, and that would be seen in the top right window. And there was also supposed to be a little girl haunting the basement. When I went, it was a marketing company that owned the building. And I talked to some of the people that worked there, and they all agreed that there's no such thing as ghost. But they still brought in a psychic to see if they could find anything. And of course, the psychic found many, many ghosts, and the dead girl in the basement was one of them. Now, what was kind of interesting about this, just as a quick aside, it was a marketing company, and the name they came up for in the room that housed the spirit of the little girl was the dead girl room. You'd think it would be better. It's a marketing company, but that's what they called it. And one other location we've gone to several times actually is Concordia University here in Edmonton, and there is a ghost by the name of Larry. So those are the types of places we have been looking at, and I'll refer back to a few of these places as we talk more about what is happening in these haunting experiences. So I guess a good place to start is to ask, why do we believe in this kind of thing, and kind of globally? And it's complex. So there's not one thing that will fully explain the experience of a haunting or somebody who believes they've seen a ghost. What I'm going to do today is go over several potential explanations. We'll start by looking at the individual level, so what's going on in our brains, and then we'll look at some of the more environmental factors. In my course on pseudoscience, I spent a lot of time talking about cognitive biases. Essentially, our brains are hardwired for belief, and we're cognitive misers. And that doesn't mean that we're not intelligent. What cognitive miser means is that it takes energy to think deeply. So a lot of the time, we're kind of on autopilot. And for the most part, it works well. We generally navigate the world fairly well, but it can lead to mistakes. And I think some of these biases can also explain why people believe they've seen a ghost or been in a house that is haunted. Now, we only have about 45 minutes today. I certainly won't go through all the biases, but I'll hit what I think are the critical ones in terms of the ghost experience. The most important, I think, is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means that we tend to seek out information we agree with, and if there's things we don't agree with, we tend to ignore it or distort the information or just dismiss it. It's a powerful effect. When we find information we agree with, we actually get a little dopamine hit. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasurable feelings. So it feels good. So let's say you believe in hauntings, or at least you've heard some things about ghosts and you're not sure. So you see this house here, you believe it's haunted, and you walk through with that belief in your head. A floorboard creaks and you go, ha, ghost. Wind rattles a window, definitely a ghost. House is cold in one room, paranormal activity, and on it goes, right? But if you take someone else, and I assume most of you here may be a bit skeptical, you'd walk in that same house, creaking floorboard, it's an old house. Cold spot, it's poor insulation, and so on. Now, this confirmation bias, we all fall prey to this, everyone. It's just the way we're hardwired. So what's the antidote? What you need to do is actively seek out disconfirming evidence. it's almost like it's a two-step process. So the confirmation bias hits, and then we think, okay, I'm going to take a step back and think about what some other explanations can be. What's the best version of the other side's argument? And I think as skeptics, we need to do that too. So when we hear these extraordinary claims, we don't just dismiss them out of hand and go, okay, that seems unlikely, but what's the best available evidence you got? And when we go on our ghost hunts, that's the approach I want my students to take. We're skeptical, but maybe there's no good evidence that we've seen thus far, but maybe. When you come in with that mentality, it frames things a little bit differently. And again, their goal is to find a rational explanation for these findings, but still allow that maybe there's something. And of course, we have never found anything we couldn't explain as of yet. Just as an example of confirmation bias, you're probably familiar with the idea of orbs. So ghost hunters say if you take a photo and there's orbs, it's the confirmation of a spirit. It's leftover energy, or there's all kinds of explanations. So I took this photo here. This was during one of our ghost hunts, and you can see the little dots. Those would be considered orbs. And if you're a ghost hunter, this would blow your mind. There are spirits everywhere. Now, again, what we should be doing as good skeptics and what the ghost hunter should be doing is thinking about alternatives. So, okay, maybe ghosts leave some energy behind somehow and it only manifests itself in photos for some reason. Or if you take a picture with the flash on, if there's any moisture in the air, any dust, you'll get an orb. Very, very easy to recreate. So if it's dusty or if you're outside and it's a little bit rainy, and this day it happened to be a bit misty outside, you're going to get a lot of orbs. It's also an artifact in some digital cameras. Cameras getting better, you tend to see them less. So as another example, on that same somewhat rainy day, I just had the flash on, took this photo, and here we have some orbs. Certainly not the sign of ghosts. Instead, it is the sign of a rather rainy day. Another huge driver of the haunting experience is expectation. You might be familiar with some of the work of Richard Wiseman. One of the studies he conducted was in Hampton Court Palace, and that is a supposedly very haunted location. So he had people go through, and what he found was that people who believed in ghosts were much more likely to report unusual experiences than those that didn't believe. And this expectation is very powerful. Let me give you an example from one of our ghost hunts. I mentioned earlier we went to the Edmonton Golf and Country Club. Here's who the ghost was supposed to be. There was a groundskeeper who believed his wife, who also worked at the club, was cheating on him. He went to the club. He murdered the person he believed was seeing his wife. He couldn't find his wife. He was going to murder her as well. And then he hung himself on the bridge. And we have a photo here. The rope that he used to hang himself was quite long. And when he jumped off the bridge to hang himself, the rope actually made his head pop clean off. That's true. That actually happened. So when we went on our ghost hunt, I told the students this story and said that this is an area we should explore then, because that's what the ghost hunters do, right? They pick an area, they have the backstory, and then they look for their evidence. And the students all agreed the bridge felt creepy and they kind of felt like something, but it turns out it's the wrong bridge. When this happened, it was a long time ago, and they have since replaced the bridge. That bridge doesn't exist anymore. This is a new bridge. So the expectation alone is making people feel something on the bridge. And then when I had the reveal that, in fact, this bridge no longer exists, people didn't feel it anymore. And I think that this can happen with a lot of the experience with ghosts. If you go on ghost tours, you're told what to feel. That expectation drives a lot. Really, in a sense, it's priming. It's priming our expectations. So with priming, there's a little bit of a misconception about how that works, I think. Priming sometimes is seen as almost like unconscious processing. We don't realize things are impacting us. That's not exactly it. Let me tell you about one of the classic studies that I'm priming. What researchers did is they tracked wine sales. Sometimes they would have French music playing in the background, and this is actually at a liquor store. Other times they would have German music. Okay, so sometimes French music is playing, sometimes German music. What they found was that when French music was playing, French wine sales went up. When German music was playing, German wine sales went up. When people were asked why they bought the wine they didn't realize it was the music. So, what priming is when you've experienced something and you don't realize it's impacting your behavior. So they know they heard the music, they just didn't realize the music was having that impact. And I think priming can explain some of the experiences people have with ghosts. So they've been primed in the sense that there are all kinds of ghost hunting shows on TV. If you go online and Instagram, there's all sorts of stuff out there. And you might not realize the impact that that's having on you. You go into an old building and you feel like, ugh, there must be something here. And you might not realize exactly how much of that is being driven by what's out in the culture. So we're pattern seekers. And often we will see things that we believe are related when in fact they are not. It's called an illusory correlation. I'll give you a really simple example. You've probably all had the experience where you're thinking about a friend and then they call you. What's the first thing you say to your friend? It's always, "Whoa, you're not going to believe this." And it kind of feels like, well, I don't want to say I made it happen, but I was thinking about you, right? All that happened was if it's a close friend, you're going to think about them sometimes. Also, if it's a close friend, they're going to call you sometimes. Occasionally, these events will overlap. That's it. Now, in ghost hunting shows, you can see this a bit too, because they'll do things like walk around a really old building, but they'll keep calling out a name. They'll keep asking for things. Eventually, when you step on something, it's going to creak, and you've just said, "Can you give me a sign?" If you keep doing it long enough, yeah, you'll experience that. It'll happen. So I'll give you an example here. This is fairly typical of what you'd see in your average ghost hunting show. Just a very short clip. Seen apparitions appearing. Some guests have claimed to have heard voices. Are you a member of the Madison family? James Madison? Are you just here to protect your family home? Did you say something to us just a second ago? Mr. Hipkins? Is there any member of the Hipkins family here? We know members of the Hipkins and Bernard families are buried right outside this house. Was it? Yeah, a little. Sound like the wind? Oh, coming forward then. Right? No? What's going on there? I can tell you what's going on. They are calling out into an empty house that is drafty, and they heard the wind. But they heard the wind immediately after they asked if whoever was there, and they then believed, or at least led their audience to believe, that they have found some form of a ghost. So this show had been on for many, many years, and that was some of the most compelling evidence. Nothing ever happens in these shows. Another bias that we have is this illusion of control. We feel like we can control things. I'm going to talk about this in the context of things like Ouija boards and calling out to spirits and so on, but I want to give you an example of the type of research that's done in this area. It's really interesting. So this was actually my graduate school supervisor. His name was Michael Enzel. And what he did is he brought people into the lab and he gave them $5. And he said, "There's a roulette wheel there. If you'd like, you can try to double your money, but it's up to you." Now, here's what he did. Half of the people were then asked to pick a ping pong ball with a number out of a bucket, and that would be their number. And if they got the number on the roulette wheel, they would double their money. Half of them were allowed to pick it up and hold it. The other half just picked it up, looked at it, and put it back. What he found was that when people were allowed to pick up the ball and hold it, they bet more than people who were only allowed to pick up the ball and then put it back. So by being able to hold on to the ping pong ball at the number, they felt like they had more control, and as such, they bet more. And there's other research that's similar to that in that when people have choice in picking a lottery ticket, they feel like that ticket is more powerful when, of course, it's just random, right? So often we feel like we're in control of something when in fact we're not. And a classic example of that is Ouija boards, dowsing rods. So the way these boards seem to work is through something called an audiomotor response. And if you watch Kenny Biddle's webinar last month, he talked a little bit about this. And just as a reminder, the audiomotor response occurs when we have a thought that triggers an unconscious involuntary muscle movement. And a simple example, when we're driving, we're always shifting our hands a little bit to stay in the lane, but we're not consciously aware that we're doing it, right? But if we just held our hands perfectly straight, we would eventually veer off the road. So we're always moving the wheel a bit. That's the audiomotor response. That's the way Ouija boards work. So with a Ouija board, you're supposed to put your hands on the planchette. It's usually 2 or 3 people that do that, then very gently move it around. And you don't realize that it's an audiomotor response. So if you want to debunk a Ouija board, all you have to do is blindfold the people using it. Now remember, it's supposed to be the spirits that are guiding the planchette, right? So it shouldn't matter if the people holding the planchette can see it, but people can't see the board, they can't do it anymore. And the dowsing rods, it's a similar idea. Dowsing is when you take 2 rods, and I actually bought the ones that you see on the screen there, and I'm going to talk more about those in a minute. But typically they're used to find water. So people walk around with these rods out. If the rods cross, you supposedly have water underneath you, and it's through some divine something. All kinds of explanations as to how it's supposed to work. Now, the ones I bought, I'll read you what the description was from Amazon. Okay, so these are very special dowsing rods. Typically, it's for water, but the ones I got, and this is directly from Amazon. Dowsing rods is a sensitive tool that can be affected by the thought and airspace. Also, will be affected by the external world and energy. Dowsing rods are usually applied to ghost hunting, divining water, looking for lost things, and paranormal investigation, etc. So there's even more apparently. So these rods that I bought can not only find water, they can also find ghosts. And they were $13, which really is a pretty darn good deal to be able to find ghosts. Unfortunately, they work very much like a Ouija board. It is simply an audiomotor response. So it feels like they're crossing. You don't really realize that you're the one controlling it. And I'll talk about how to debunk that in just a couple minutes. And again, if we're looking at more the individual level, for some hauntings, you could use sleep paralysis as a plausible explanation for what people have experienced. Now, this isn't the majority of hauntings, but for any haunting where somebody feels like in the middle of the night they've been visited by a spirit, there's a good chance it's sleep paralysis. So if you're not familiar with it, what sleep paralysis is when we're sleeping, we'll go into these REM states, in REM sleep. When we're in REM sleep, rapid eye movement, that tends to be when we're dreaming. And for the most part, our bodies are paralyzed. Our fingers will twitch a bit and so on. Now, sometimes when we're waking up or just going to sleep, it's almost like a REM state kind of intrudes on a waking period. That's a bit simplistic, but essentially it's kind of like being a bit awake, but also dreaming, and you're paralyzed. And what you see in this painting here, this is 1781. It's called The Nightmare. That is a perfect example of what sleep paralysis feels like. It can be quite scary. It feels like something is on your chest. And there's actually some interesting cultural differences too. So in Korea, the experience is being squeezed by scissors. Newfoundland, it's called the old hag, similar to what you'd see in the photo here. The medieval times, those evil spirits. And in Thailand, it may be attributed to ghosts. Now, what sleep paralysis actually is, again, it's just this REM period intruding on a wakefulness period, and it's really, really common. It tends to be a bit more common when you're younger. About a third of college students have experienced it. It is not a sign of any kind of problems or any psychological issues. It just sometimes happens, but it can be quite frightening. I think we can explain some alien abductions by this, and I think we can explain some ghost visitations, especially the ones, or primarily the ones, that happen at night. So let's go back to expectation and priming. If you're somebody who watches, say, a lot of ghost shows or looks at a lot of ghost things online, and then the sleep paralysis hits, it's plausible then that you might kind of piece these things together and see it in the form of a visitation from a ghost. So again, it won't explain all the hauntings, but if it's something at night, pretty good chance. We can look too at pareidolia. So that's when we see meaning and meaningless visual stimuli. So you might be familiar with this phenomenon. The reason it happens is that our brains are highly sensitive to faces. So we've got this face detection circuitry that can be triggered by essentially little evidence. So you can arrange just a few shapes and it's going to look like eyes, a nose, and a mouth. It doesn't take much. And the, the idea is that it's probably an evolutionary holdover. I mean, if you think about it, in our ancestral past, let's say you missed a real face signaling you're a predator or a rival that was in the bushes. That could be deadly and you would die. But occasionally seeing one that isn't there, like in a rock or in a shadow, but that's relatively harmless, right? So there could be an evolutionary basis for why our brains evolved to be particularly sensitive to faces. And it also explains why we see a lot of things that may not be there in the shadows, or especially in dim light. So just a couple quick examples. This onion clearly has a face in it. This building is quite surprised. We've got some coffee surprised here as well. And I really like this one. This is from my son. He was biking through the river valley here in Edmonton and came across this and got a bit of a scare. I'll zoom it in. And that is snow, and it's melting around the tree on the branches there, but clearly looks like a face. It is not. That is just some melting snow. So let's go back to the Mackenzie house. Now, remember, earlier I said that one of the ghosts was in that top right window. The job for my students when we do these ghost hunts is to try to come up with an explanation for what people see. So we were outside and we were trying to figure out what would make it look like there's a person with a top hat in a window. And a car drove by. And when the car drove by and the lights hit the trees and reflected off the window, you could kind of see it. That was it. It was pareidolia, and it was caused by the reflection of car lights off trees on that particular window. It didn't look a lot like that, but if you looked at it at a glance and you already were primed to believe it was a person in a top hat, you can see how people might then misattribute that to a ghost. That's what it was. Now, if you want to try to have your own ghost-like experience, I recommend trying to build a psychomanteum. I'll tell you what they are if you're not aware of them, and how to set one up. In parapsychology and spiritualism, a psychomanteum is set up in a dimly lit room with a mirror, and the idea is you're going to communicate with the dead. When you gaze into the mirror, the dead may manifest themselves in several ways, but it's usually through some form of a distortion of your face. And what's actually happening here is something called the Troxler effect or Troxler fading. If we fixate on a point and there's unchanging stimuli, then what will happen is that things will start to fade or distort a little bit. Again, that's a bit of a simplistic overview, but basically it's due to neural adaptation in the retina and the brain. So low light will enhance this effect by reducing contrast and detail. And what will happen then is as you stare at this mirror, your face will start to distort. It doesn't work with everyone. Some researchers looked into this and did a meta-analysis of some face distortion illusions, and it's about 65, 66% of people can find this effect. So in that study, you can see this is one of the figures from the study. It was Mashal. It was done a couple of years ago. This is generally how you would set up a psychomanteum. So you want that dim light, and you can see that the light at the back is turned backwards. And the reason why is that then it's dimmer, right? And then you stare directly into that mirror. So when we go on a ghost hunt with the classes, we set up a psychomanteum and have people stare into them. And I'd say around 3/4 of students can find the effect. So if you want to set it up at home, here's how I set ours up. So you see the chair there. I've got a couple candles to the side, which are quite dim, and then the mirror. What we found by working with a number of different students on this is people seem to have different sensitivity to how dim it should be. So if it's not working for you, you might want to make it a little bit less light. And another thing that can help as well is you can see here the mirror is basically at 90 degrees. If you can find a way to tilt it forward just a little bit, so you're almost kind of looking up at it, the effect tends to be a bit more pronounced. And it's actually quite a startling effect at times. So for me, I can't get it to work when it's this close, but if I'm farther back, it'll work. And the last time I did, it looked like my smile went all the way up to my ears and my eyes just kind of disappeared. Now, I knew what was happening, so it wasn't scary. It's very interesting. But again, imagine you've been told you're about to communicate with a ghost. It'd be terrifying. Most people don't know why it's happening. It's this adaptation in the brain. So again, we can be sympathetic with why people believe that these are real signals of a haunting. Another thing the ghost hunters talk about are magnetic fields. Now, it is true that if you have a low frequency magnetic field, and it could be from things like faulty wiring or equipment, that could stimulate the temporal lobe, which could lead to feelings of discomfort, possibly dread. Sensitivity varies to be sure. But this could be one potential piece of the puzzle. So if you're in an old building with, say, some dodgy electronics, or the electrical system is not good, perhaps it could amplify your feelings of fear. That's real. That happens. Now, ghost hunters will say that if there are readings from an EMF meter, but there's no source as to why they go off, it's because there's a ghost there, because ghosts leave behind energy, and on and on. So it is true that electromagnetic fields could potentially lead to these feelings of dread. It's caused usually by faulty wiring or faulty equipment and so on. And if you get a good EMF meter, it will find those things. Here's what the ghost hunters do. They use really bad EMF meters. And if you get a really cheap one, they'll go off all the time. So when you watch a ghost hunting show and an EMF meter goes off and they say, okay, well, this went up, but there's clearly no reason this should go off right here. It's because it's a bad meter. The irony of ghost hunting materials is that often they are the worst quality because you want them to be bad. You want a bad EMF meter because then it'll go off randomly. But if you slap ghost on it, then you can charge a lot of money. So you're paying way more for something that does way less. Another environmental variable. I've done a little bit of research in this area, and I'm going to talk about a study that's just coming out next week. So this is hot off the presses. I believe it's going to be released on the 27th in Frontiers, so in behavioral neuroscience in Frontiers. And it's on infrasound. So infrasound is a sound below 20 hertz. Now, at that frequency, we can't hear it, but we can feel it. One way to think about this, imagine you're at a concert and the hair on the back of your neck goes up and you get some tension in your chest, right? But you would know why, right? It's the bass, it's loud bass from the concert. So no surprises there. If you had that same experience though, and you didn't know what was causing it, then you would start to look for some explanation. And again, if you're in a place that perhaps was supposed to be haunted, the hair on the back of your neck goes up, you feel this tension in your chest, it's reasonable for people to think it would be a ghost, when in fact it might be infrasound. Now, why would it be infrasound? Well, infrasound's kind of all around us. It's caused by things like traffic, thunder, and importantly, for the ghost aspect, low rumbling pipes. Old buildings tend to have old pipes, old boilers, that can cause infrasound. So again, imagine you walk into the basement of this old building and it's creepy and it's dark and all of a sudden you feel something. Incredibly good chance it's infrasound. Most people don't know what it is. Now, to test infrasound, it's actually quite expensive. We got a mic, but we got it on sale for $9,000, so hot deal. But a much cheaper way to see if there's any infrasound there is to get a lighter. And let me just show you here. So this is a lighter in front of an infrasound speaker that I built. And what you'll see with infrasound is that the flame will start to behave quite strange. So you won't be able to hear anything, but you'll see that the flame either bends in the middle or it'll start to spin in a circle like you're seeing here. Now, this is a lot of infrasound. It would be more common you'd see something like this. This is from the Ghost Hunt at Concordia, and what you can see is that the flame is kind of bending in the middle. Now that's much more likely. So there's definitely some infrasound in this area. Now you can't tell how much with this flame method, but at least you'll know if it's there or not. To determine exactly how much, then you need to get one of these mics. So let me tell you a little bit about the research we've done here, and then I'll lead into the research that'll be published next week. There was some work on infrasound where people were brought into, it was an apartment, and the apartment was covered in white, so white sheets. And what the researchers did is they had infrasound playing or not, and they had some other variables too, but in the interest of time, we'll simplify things a bit. It was a dimly lit room, and then people were asked to walk around for 45 minutes. And what the researchers found was that the presence or absence of infrasound didn't really seem to impact people. But if you think about that study, imagine walking around a dimly lit room for 45 minutes. That's really boring, right? So I thought, well, maybe what you need is that fear response and the infrasound will enhance it. So I did some initial work at Dedmonton, which you see here. So the Edmonton Haunted House, if you haven't been, it's a commercial haunted house, Hollywood level special effects. Normally they have 100 actors. We went in the off hours, so there are no actors, but still a lot of very spooky stuff around. We hooked our participants up to a GoPro camera. We had a number of other measures, and we let them walk around and explore. We also had infrasound speakers there. Sometimes the infrasound was on, sometimes the infrasound was off. So what we wanted to see is if that infrasound enhanced the fear response. So let me just show you a short video of what it looked like to be a participant in this study. So this is an example of what they would see, and clearly there's some scary stuff in there. So that's what the study looked like. Now, what did we find? Unfortunately, we had some problems with our equipment, but we had one finding. It turns out that when the infrasound was on, people went through faster than when it was off. Kind of interesting, but certainly not enough to definitively say what impact infrasound is having. So we've done some follow-ups, and the follow-up is what is going to be published next week. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. We brought people into the lab here at MacEwan University, so we wanted a more controlled environment. And when people came into the lab, they were randomly assigned to either listen to unsettling sounds, kind of what you'd hear. I'll give you an example in a second. So the stuff you'd hear in, say, like a haunted house, or calming music, relaxing music. And then the infrasound was either on or off. So we had measures of how they felt, and we also measured cortisol. We did that through saliva samples, and cortisol is a hormone associated with stress. So really what we wanted to see is if the presence of infrasound would make cortisol levels go up. And we were interested in the difference too between what people were hearing. We thought maybe infrasound just caused you to feel something. So if you're hearing music that's relatively happy, you'll feel even happier or more relaxed. Whereas if you're hearing something scary, it'll make it even more scary. So here's what they heard. This would be the calming and relaxing music. It went on for 5 minutes. It was a 5-minute exposure to infrasound. And this is the unsettling sounds they would hear.
Rodney, I couldn't hear anything.
You can't hear it?
No.
All right, let me assure you then that it was unsettling.
Believe.
Believe. That's right. I know it's a group of skeptics, but you're just going to have to trust me. Sorry about that. All right. So I'll show you what we found. It turns out when the infrasound was on, people rated the audio clip as less interesting in both the calming and unsettling sound condition. As well, they rated both as more sad, and they also felt more irritated, regardless of whether they heard the calming or unsettling music. So you can see when it was calming, they definitely didn't feel as irritated as when it was unsettling, but once the infrasound was on in both conditions, it went up. And then what's really cool is that the cortisol levels went up in both. So let's quickly explain this graph. If you look at the off, so that's when there's no infrasound. When people were listening to the calming music, their cortisol levels went down slightly. And it went up a bit, as we'd expect, when they were listening to the unsettling sounds. If we look at the on condition, though, what you see is that in that relaxing music condition, cortisol went up, and it went up even more than in the opposition when you had the unsettling music. And if you combine all this data, what we find is an overall effect that when the infrasound is on, cortisol levels go up. Again, cortisol is a hormone associated with stress. So pretty interesting. So bring it all back to ghosts. This is just one small piece of the puzzle, but especially if you're going into an old building or an old basement, there's a good chance there's infrasound, and it can lead to these feelings of irritation, feeling kind of unsettled. So where do we go next with this? We're doing a follow-up, and we're going to supposedly haunted locations, and we're measuring infrasound levels. So we want to see if where there is a haunting, if there's more infrasound than areas where there is supposedly none. We've only gone to, I think, 4 or 5 locations right now, so it's too early to say what we found. But one of the locations is the Banff Springs Hotel, which is the home of the supposed ghost bride. And so we're going to go measure the stairwell that she supposedly fell from and perished. So let's wrap this up a bit. What do we know about ghosts? Well, we know cognitive biases can explain, at least partially, some of the experiences of a haunting, and expectation is a clear driver of that. Sleep paralysis can explain some ghosts, but I would argue rarely. We're just really looking at the ones that happen at night. And then there's the environmental factors, so the electromagnetic frequencies and things like infrasound and so on. So, knowing all of this, now people should not believe in ghosts, right? So even if you're a believer before, you go, aha, now I know the answer. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. We're going to finish off with one more bias, and it's called belief perseverance. It turns out that it's incredibly difficult to get people to change their minds once they believe something. One of the classic studies looking at this was it was called the suicide note study. And what researchers did is they brought people into the lab and they told them they had a task. They had a number of notes to look through. And they said, these are suicide notes. Some are real and some are fake. And they said, your ability to determine real from fake is a sign of how empathetic you are. Some people were then told you scored in the top 10%. Others were told they scored at the bottom. But that feedback was random. So they were told that this is a good measure of empathy, but in fact, they just got random feedback, which they didn't know about. Then they were asked, how empathetic are you? And again, I am simplifying this a bit. So not surprisingly, when people were told they did well on this task, they rated themselves as quite empathetic. And when they were told they didn't do well, they rated themselves as not empathetic. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Then the researchers told everyone what was going on, said, okay, look, all your feedback was false. So ignore that feedback. That was all part of the experiment. We did not actually measure whether or not you got these correct. That feedback means nothing. Then people are asked again later to evaluate how empathetic they saw themselves. The people who were told earlier they're in the top 10% rated themselves as far more empathetic than people who were told they were at the bottom, even though that feedback was false and they knew it. Here's what's going on. So imagine you're in this study and you were told you're in the top 10%. You're very empathetic. Then you start to think about like, oh yeah, my friends come to me when they have problems. I am empathetic. So you come up with all these reasons to justify why you're empathetic. And on the flip side, if you're told you're at the bottom, then you start thinking of reasons you're at the bottom. You go, oh yeah, well, I could be there for people more. I don't donate. I could help more. So then when you're told the feedback was fake, you still have all these other things that you've already generated. That's why the effect lasts. And the same is true with ghosts. So if you've got someone who's a strong believer, they could hear everything I've said today, and they'd say, okay, that might explain some of them. But one time I went into a building and whatever the story is, right? So what do we do? How do we help people become better consumers of information, not fall prey to these claims? Well, I think education's really the key. I teach a course again on pseudoscience. I'm doing some research trying to create demonstrations that I'm going to give to junior highs and high schools to help kids become better critical thinkers, because there's a lot of evidence showing that pre-bunking is really the key. Once you believe something, it's very hard to change that perspective. But if you can hit people before they're exposed to that belief and give them more information and help them become better critical thinkers, then you're getting somewhere. So I've got a picture here of the dowsing rods again. And this is from some research that we just recently conducted. And what we did is we allowed people to use dowsing rods to find water the way it's traditionally done. You hold the rods and they cross. Then we put them in this device. And I'd like to give a shout out to Kenny Biddle again. Kenny got us onto this device and told us how to make it. So remember, the way dowsing rods work, it's an audio motor response. It's these unconscious reactions. So you don't realize you're actually moving the rods. When you put the rods in this device, there's a level. And if you hold the level even, the rods will never cross. So what we were hoping is that this would be a really simple demo that we could then, again, just give away to high schools, junior highs, and so on, which would promote critical thinking. We've done some research, and the problem, we didn't find any results yet, but the reason why we believe is that we tested this on first-year university students who are in psychology. And I was one of the authors on the textbook that they use. Chapter 1 deals with the difference between science and pseudoscience. And what's good is it appears that they were paying attention. So when they came into the lab, their belief in pseudoscience was very, very low. So there's really nowhere to go. It was already very low. So what we're going to do in the future is maybe go out to high schools or go out to different populations that haven't had this exposure about the difference between science and pseudoscience and really look to try to build more demos like this. I've also got a student who's working on some just quick digital demos that you can do online. So, and again, if we can validate them, if we can show they work, then we'll just give them away. And hopefully we can provide tools to teachers who want to promote critical thinking. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm open for questions.
Yeah,
Wow,
I
Rodney,
have a,
fantastic.
Thank you.
oh,
Who's talking?
sorry, it was me, but I didn't have my hand up yet.
Oh,
So
okay.
go ahead with Brent, and I'll figure out how to put my hand up.
That was just a clap for me, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
I have DD here. I don't know who's. You're
I'm
mute,
just
DD.
clapping.
Okay.
I'm just clapping.
Okay, can I go even though I can't
Yeah,
figure out how to put my hand up?
of course.
So I mentioned before most people got here that my father was a true believer in the paranormal. And some of our family friends were too. So I've I've had the occasion to be with people who truly believed in what they were doing. And one thing I thought it was interesting, those dowsing rods. He was a builder and out in the countryside. And the way to get water out there is you dig a well. And he actually used somebody who used dowsing sticks to tell him where to dig the well on the properties that he was building a house on. And it seemed to work. So I've thought about this in the meantime and thought, you know, in your experience, do you come across people who are truly convinced that they have this gift and somehow they're able to read the landscape or somehow figure it out so that it's almost subconscious that they know where the water is, and that's what's leading them to have the sticks cross at just the right spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think in cases like that, and it's a little bit of a case by case basis, but I think you've nailed it. I think people that are very familiar with the land probably can spot the likelihood of where there's going to be water. And my guess would be for some people, they could probably do, or well, they would do just as well when they don't have the dowsing rods. And what happens with a lot of these dowsers is that you tend to forget the misses, but remember the hits because it's so impressive. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with James Randi and the work he's done. So Randi actually tested a lot of dowsers and he got them out in natural environments and had water and they all agreed to how the procedure would work and they all failed miserably. So I think for some people, they might just have a sense of, okay, well, this is typical of the kind of the landscape you'd find where there's water. And then again, with that audio motor response, if they believe that this is where there should be water, it would cross, thus confirming again with the confirmation bias and so on that this works when in fact they might just be very good at determining where that is based on kind of where the land is. And they also too might be a bit dismissive of the misses. But again, case by case basis, I can't certainly say how all dowsers do it, but that would be my guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Danita, just one comment. I put on the chat the video from Richard Saunders on We Can Reason 2024. He had an experiment on stage. and to show the dowsing, and he explains a lot about that. So you might enjoy the video.
Okay. And I can also share a time that I saw paranormal activity with my own eyes. I was traveling with two friends in university so many years ago. And we were sharing a room, and so many weird things happened to us that day and that whole weekend. And at one point, I was looking at the end of the bed, and these textbooks appeared sitting on the end of the bed, and I could feel the weight of them on the bed. And we all thought it was a very paranormal weekend we were all having, although, I wasn't totally convinced. But I found out a number of years later that I'm prone to sleep paralysis. I haven't been for many years, but at that time of my life, I was just starting to have these, didn't know what they were, had no idea. But I'm convinced now that that's what it was, because it's typical of some of the other ones that I've had.
It sounds like it. Yeah. And I mean, if you
Yeah.
don't know what it is a genuinely frightening experience.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
feels incredibly real. I've had it several times myself. One time I thought my roommate when I was in college came home and talked to me, and I was convinced he did, but it felt weird. So when he got home that day, I said, "So were you around earlier?" He's like, "No." Huh. So it felt very, very real. So there's a very good chance that's what it was, especially if you felt the kind of the pressure on the bed. That's really common with sleep paralysis, is to feel pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Danita.
Thank
Brent?
you.
Yeah, so my question is there any adaptive strategy for detecting infrasound? Or is it just coincidental that's something that is irrelevant or unrelated to any adaptive strategy?
Do you mean from like an evolutionary perspective?
Yes. Yeah.
There's some speculation that there could be an evolutionary advantage in being able to detect, say, like rumblings that could predict things like earthquakes and so on. So perhaps we didn't look directly as much into the mechanisms and the why as much as I was primarily interested in kind of the haunting aspect of it. But that's a speculation that there could be some evolutionary adaptiveness to this. And but we don't know. But that is definitely something researchers have looked at for sure.
Okay, thank
Robert?
you.
Oh, sorry, there we are. Am I on?
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry. Thank you, Rodney. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. My introduction to dowsing was about 20 years ago with Corner Gas. They do a whole episode where Brent and his mother are having this competition to look for water, drilling a well on a farm or for irrigation. And I think it's okay to do spoilers. Brent finds a septic tank rather than clean water.
I'm gonna have to look that one up again. Thank you.
Yeah, I forget the number, but it's a really funny episode. And I also appreciate next month, Skeptics in the Pub here in Calgary. I know you're in Edmonton. I'm doing a talk on confirmation bias. So
cool.
so it was interesting. And actually I was working on it today. So wanted to thank you for a couple of points about confirmation bias that I had not yet come across, the dopamine, because it was one of my slides is why do we have confirmation bias and all that. So hope I'm
Cool.
not stealing, but yeah.
No, take it. Steal it.
Oh, great.
If
Thank you.
Helio, if I can get your contact information, I could send you a couple articles too you might be interested in. So I'm happy to share some information with you. I got some pretty neat stuff.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Helio's got my
Yeah,
contact. So
I'll send it.
So
Don't
yeah,
worry.
that's all I wanted to say. So thanks for a very interesting talk.
Well, thank you.
Brown and sticky stick. Oh, we could go all night with Corner Gas quotes. All right. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
I guess it's my
Jim?
turn.
Yeah.
Okay. So Uh, yeah, so well, every time I've used confirmation bias, it's worked. But anyway, and I'll 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 throw in my dowsing story. Uh, when I was in my teens, my parents had bought some land for a cottage, uh, and they wanted to put in a drill point to have a well for a bit of water, and uh, so hired some people to put to do the drive point, and they had a dowser come in to figure out the best spot. And I thought, well, okay, so we've got this sort of sandy soil with a few glacial rocks dumped in there, and we've got the Ottawa River just over there. Where could you put a well without running into water?
Good point.
Yeah, and oh, and I think I'd like to share this. Does that work? No. Yes. Okay, you were screen sharing. Yeah. So can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
You will meet a tall, dark stranger who says you owe him money. Your Mercury is in retrograde and needs an oil change. You will have exciting and interesting future due to your many bad decisions. What the heck is this? My bad. You have many followers, most of them out of curiosity. I asked Kai to get me a medium coffee, and she brought me this.
That's great.
Anyway, I just thought I'd share that. Anyway, next one.
Did he?
So my question is about ghosts in particular, and not that I believe this at all, but how do you know for sure that ghosts are intelligent and sensitive, and they only will appear to those people that will accept them and believe
Right.
them?
Yeah, and that's the claim of the psychics and the ghost hunters and so on, is that if there's a skeptic in the crowd, the ghost won't appear and you need to believe. And there's no way to prove that false. But if we look at it from a scientific perspective, if something's not falsifiable, it's not testable. So maybe, but the onus is on the people making the claim to show the evidence. And if the best they can do is say, well, the evidence is there, but you can't see it because you don't believe it, it's not particularly compelling evidence. So can we dismiss it entirely out of hand? Well, no, technically not. But functionally, especially from a scientific perspective, there's no weight to that argument.
Brent? Oh,
I
Brent?
wasn't clear on the distinction between belief perseverance and confirmation bias. They sound like they're the same thing. What's the difference?
They're similar. Confirmation bias means we seek out things we agree with. So even if you think about the people you spend time with, they're probably fairly similar, right? And one of the appeals of that is that it's reinforcing the things you believe. And that's kind of a form of confirmation bias. So when we hear information that doesn't fit with what we believe, we tend to ignore it or dismiss it and so on. Belief perseverance is a little bit different. With belief perseverance, what that means is once we believe something and then we're given the counter evidence and we're shown good counter evidence, there's a strong tendency to still believe. So it's not that you're necessarily seeking out or more likely or to be drawn to this information. It's just that once we believe something, it's really hard to get people to stop believing it. And it's for those reasons that I talked about in the sense that once you believe something, you get a lot of beliefs that can form around that. So it's a little bit of a different idea. There's definitely some overlap in the concepts, but it's a little bit more specific with belief perseverance, and that we're specifically talking about how difficult it is to change people's minds once they believe something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so would confirmation bias be like a subset of belief?
I'd say confirmation bias is more kind of the broader concept. I think that's really one of the overarching biases that drive a lot of what we do. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons, and social media is complex, but one of the reasons social media is so reinforcing is that we just keep getting these hits of things that we agree with, right? So that gives us that little dopamine hit, and it really ties into that idea of confirmation bias. And then what happens too is we start to believe that everybody thinks the way we do. So when we hear people that disagree, we just kind of ignore them, and it doesn't fit. We just block that off.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Richard?
Hello. First of all, I guess I have to say that I haven't joined the Rocky Mountain Atheists. Like I haven't made a donation officially or anything. This is my second event, so
No worries.
I will do that as
Thank you.
soon as possible. I feel like I'm kind of sneaking in for free.
No worries. We love when people come and enjoy, and that's it. No worries.
Thanks for having me. So first of all, thank you, Rodney. Really fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
One thing I have a question, but I just wanted to share something with you because I remember my anthropology professor many years ago talking about our evolutionary past when we were, I'm not sure exactly where in the hominid evolutionary chain we were, but we were heavily predated on by large cats. And there's a lot of evidence from caves of that as well. But they hunt through binocular vision, and she was talking about a stare, and she said, when you're in a crowd and someone stares at you, and you almost feel it, you turn around, and she was saying there's like no scientific evidence for this, but there is something there possibly that was evolving, and I don't have any explanation for it, but it just stuck with me for many, many years on that. So I don't know.
That's really interesting. When I was in grad school, my supervisor was interested in exactly that.
Oh.
He was interested to see because he thought that there's some evolutionary basis for that and that you could just feel it. And he ran a couple experiments, and they were relatively straightforward. He would have people behind. He would manipulate whether they were being stared at or not. He couldn't find an effect. So he kind of gave up on the idea, but it was that idea, and he tried to test it, but what he found was nothing.
Okay, good. Nothing. I can sleep better after 30 years.
There you go.
Okay. So my question is, it's related to kind of a broad scale. It's like in more secular societies, like some of the Scandinavian countries, where religious belief is very low. Does that what is the belief in ghosts in those societies compared to less secular societies? Is there a link between that? And then social media. How is social media changing that now? Because it's like, as you said earlier.
Really interesting question. And I'll be frank, I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that myself. It would be really interesting to look at those cultural differences.
Yeah.
Most of what I've been focusing on is more kind of your traditional North American ghost hunters and those types of things, right? So there is a link between religiosity and belief in things like ghosts, which makes sense. But I'm not sure how different the belief system would be in those countries where religiosity is low, because I know there still are ghost stories there, but I'm not sure how different the stories are or the level of belief. But really interesting, something that I would definitely like to look into.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave. I'm sorry. I've got another appointment, but I just want to say thank you again. And I do hope, well, maybe see you on a cold day this weekend for the pickleball. Maybe. I'm not sure if I'll make
Sure.
it. There is pickleball. I think it's going to be the cold day, but
yeah, follow us on Meetup. We have lots of events. We have the conference next week, and we have some interesting in-person events too. Thank you, Richard.
Okay. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
so now it's my turn. It's more of a comment than a question, but I come from a country that's very it's not only religious, but in Brazil, right? We believe we have so many urban legends and folklore and stuff, and my family was always a believer of cures of many ways, and you have that person that has some powers to heal, and spiritism. Is that the word? Spiritism? Yes.
Spiritualism, yeah.
Spiritualism. But actually, we have universities that teach. So that part of belief, how do you call it? Belief, it's not confirmation. How do you call it? When it's changed it's hard to change people's minds.
It's belief perseverance. Yeah,
Perseverance.
for
Yeah,
sure.
thank you.
Yeah, belief perseverance.
Is there a way we can try and break that, even if it's not immediate, but in long term?
It's tough, but there are ways. So basically, the reason we have this belief perseverance, like I said, is it's not just one belief. There'll be a lot of beliefs that are surrounded and kind of founded on that belief, right? So if you have a core belief of religiosity, say, there's a lot of things that are going to form around that. And that's kind of how your world works, and especially your social world. So when we tell people then that your belief is not true, and we give them good evidence, what we've done is we've created, it's like a cognitive gap. And you've got to fill that gap somehow in a way that's meaningful for that person. And it's easy to say that, much, much harder to do that. So if your entire social circle, say, focuses on, I don't know, some form of alternative medicine, and you all believe that works and share these ideas, and all of a sudden you learn that this doesn't work, well, then all of your friends are wrong, and you've spent all this money, and there's a lot going against us trying to show people that, some of their beliefs might be wrong. And even with that idea of confirmation bias, we don't like it when we are told we're wrong. It doesn't feel good. It impacts our self-esteem. So there's a lot going against us. So one of the best things we can be doing, I think, educate earlier. That's really the key. I mean, from my perspective, when kids are learning about science, they should be learning about this stuff too, becoming better consumers of information. Even if you're not directly tackling, specific pseudoscientific claims, we should be giving them the skills so that they can recognize them. And that drives into some of the research that I'm doing too, is to try to get these demonstrations and validate them, and hopefully that'll help. But that's a very long way to say it, incredibly difficult, but it's possible. And I think too, the paranormal side is more interesting, really. I mean, when we do these ghost hunts, if we would find a ghost, that would be great. That's way more interesting than walking around an old house. I mean, that's all we're doing. When I told my wife I was giving this talk today and so I'm going to give evidence that there's no ghost, she goes, "Why do you ruin everything for everyone?" Which may be true in some things, but it wasn't true in this one, because I think the psychology behind it is even more interesting. And I think if we could kind of get that interest, get people excited about science, which can be hard to do, but we need to get people, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and so on, and those type of people getting the word out and getting people excited. That helps as well.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah. Just related to that infrasound bit, I remember hearing something about elephants communicating by what's below human free auditory range.
Yeah, that's infrasound.
So if I don't know, so our ancestors on the African savannah, it might have been useful to know where the elephants are.
Exactly. Yeah, they do communicate through that.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Okay, I'll present my closing slides now, but we can have a few more questions. We still have a little bit of time, but just so we don't miss the closing statements. So if you want to contact our speaker, here's his website, rodneyschmaltz.com. And don't worry about making a note, because I'll put this on the video description. Next on We Can Reason, we'll have again our friend Alan Kozlow. He'll be talking about ethics without deities, humanism, science fiction, film, and media. So if you were here for his last presentation, he was talking about humanism in books, and now he'll focus on film and media. It will be a lot. There will be a lot of information for us. Again, he's an expert in the subject. Now let's talk a little bit about our conference. So let me show you the video. Yes, very exciting. Next week, we'll be having our fourth edition of the our conference, WeCanReason.com. Yeah, someone want to comment something? No? Okay. Guys, help us spread the word. We have two websites, RockyMountainAtheist.ca and WeCanReason.com. Our social media is below the websites. We focus on We Can Reason mostly on science and critical thinking and non-atheistic related subjects. So if you want to share some content, you can use We Can Reason. We are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So it's better for people who want to keep a low profile. We also have a Facebook group. We are reaching 100 people. We are almost on 100 people, 100 members this month. Very exciting. We grew a lot in the last couple of months. And as always, you will find the donate button and the become a member. Just $24.99 to become a member per year. So please, if you can, consider becoming a member because it helps us a lot. And of course, subscribe to our emails. We don't send that many emails. It's mostly 2 per week, one from Rocky Mountain and one from We Can Reason with the information that our speakers shared the previous week and whatever we did the previous week for the Rocky Mountain Atheists. So you have one digest to see everything we did. And we have, of course, our newsletter, our monthly newsletter. We have two important in-person events, our Skeptics in the Pub, that's been running since 2008. It's every third Friday of the month at the Limerick's traditional public house here on MacLeod Trail. And we have our new Thriving Without Religion every second Monday of the month at the Congress Coffee Company. It's open for everyone, of course. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, spiritually curious people. It's not like our Life Without Religion, so this is open. Anyone can come and have a coffee and talk about it, whatever topic is being discussed that month. And it's been very successful as well. Now I'll stop sharing. And anyone else? Oh, Brent raises his hand. Yes, Brent, go ahead.
Yeah, just an update on the speakers in this year's conference. Unfortunately, Greta Vesper had to withdraw for health reasons. So we've got Sheng Sei, CSA, I think his last name,
Yes.
is the speaker in her place. Their bios are on the website, so anybody who's interested in the updates can check that. And a shout out to Rodney from last year. It was an excellent presentation last year, by the way, Rodney.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Rodney's presentation was great. And just about our new speakers, Shang Tsai, he has a YouTube channel. Well, we send content from all our ex-speakers with our weekly digest. And he seems to be very interesting. He's a statistician. He was a Christian, and so it's very interesting. Yeah. Any questions to Rodney, guys? Anyone? No? Okay, so I have to say a few words. Jim, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Oh, yes, that's just the.
Oh, okay.
You're
just saying goodbye. Well, I have to say to you guys, we met Rodney last year, and that the We Can Reason was great, fantastic. And I had the pleasure of being at one of his events this year in February. And it was so inspiring to see that young generation coming and speaking and saying, yeah, I was there cheering for all of them. It's amazing how much they respect you, Rodney. I wouldn't expect any other way. Even Scott.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Scott Seminima. I always forget his last name.
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah, your ex-student, and he'll be presenting a webinar for us as well.
Yeah, that's great.
I think in September. I think it's his webinar.
Yeah.
So it was a fantastic experience. I can't wait to repeat it. because it's really inspirational when we see the younger generation. We are kind of, not you, but in RMA, we are a little over the mid-age, right? And
I'm there too.
it's very nice to see young people coming and being so dedicated to learning, and they were so excited in presenting. So thank you very much. What you're doing makes a big difference for
I
sure.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And and thank you all guys for coming once again. This video will be available probably on Friday, and I'll post on our social media on Friday evening, so you can all watch and share if you want. And even you, Rodney, I'll send you the links.
That'd be great.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks
Enjoy
again.
your week.
Yep. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.